So I grab my opponent's wrist to control his arms. When you do this in a fight, your opponent will want to posture up to break your grips. If he pulls his right arm away to break my grip, then I will force his right arm down between his legs. So again, if he pulls his right arm away from my body, I will force his right arm down between his legs. Next, you want to go for the triangle, but you don't want to spread your legs wide. You want to slide them past your opponent's shoulders, keep everything tight. My left leg goes over his right shoulder and across the back of his neck. Then, I throw my right leg over my left leg. To finish the submission, I squeeze my legs tight. Notice my knees squeezing together. This decreases the space inside of the triangle, making the strangle stronger. One more time. I push his arm down, wrap my left leg around the right side of his neck, throw my left leg over my right shin, and secure the position. To help apply the triangle, I reach my right hand up, grab my shin, and pull my leg down. Notice how this breaks his posture. Also notice how I have moved his right arm toward my left side. This is key for finishing the submission. To lock everything tight, I pull his head down with my hands and squeeze my legs tight. One more time. I grab his hands, he tries to break my grips, and as he does this, I pass my leg over. To help secure the triangle, I grab my shin and pull my leg down. Next, I pull his head down with my hands and squeeze my legs tight. Now I demonstrate how to apply a kimura on an opponent in your guard. First, I grab my opponent's wrist to control his arm. Next, I reach my opposite arm across his body, sit up, hook my right arm around his right arm, and then secure the kimura position by grabbing my left wrist with my right hand. In order to finish the submission, you must escape your hips off to the side. If your opponent has his head in the center of your body, then it can prevent you from sitting up. In such a situation, I will push my opponent's head off to the side as I obtain control of his arm. From there, you finish the submission the same. Notice I'm keeping his elbow bent at 90 degrees. This allows me to put a maximum pressure on the shoulder joint while at the same time minimizing his escape options. Now I demonstrate a technique for sweeping your opponent to his back when he's in your guard. I like this sweep a lot because it often catches your opponent by surprise. To set it up, I will lock in a kimura on my opponent's arm and then use my positioning to execute the sweep. If my opponent defends against the sweep, then I will put my focus into finishing him with the kimura. However, my first approach is to use the hold on his arm for the sweep. So I push on my opponent's head and attack with the kimura. You can place your left foot on your opponent's hip, or you can place it lower on his knee, whichever you feel is more comfortable. By locking in the kimura, your opponent will focus on protecting his arm. While he's preoccupied, you make some space and then strike his leg with your leg. You don't want to strike his leg directly from the side, but rather from the side and downward. When successful, it takes you right to the mount. With your opponent worried about you locking in the kimura, he forgets about his leg in the sweep. I go for his arm and hip out a little bit as I dominate his arm. As he defends against the kimura, I kick, sweep him, and end up in the mount. I push on my opponent's head and dominate his arm. Notice how as I attack his arm, I scoot my hips out to my right side. When I do this, my left leg gets closer to my opponent's right leg. Next, I execute the sweep and claim the mount position.
Mais uma vez, tire a cabeça dele, vou me ajeitando, coloco esse pé aqui, ele está defendendo o braço,
Now I spar with my brother from the guard position, using the techniques I just demonstrated. Now I show a very basic sweep, one that is taught to jiu-jitsu white belts. Although it's quite simple, it's highly effective. To begin, I place my feet on my opponent's hips, which is a defensive position. Next, I slide my left foot between my opponent's legs, hook my right foot around the inside of his left leg, drive my left arm underneath his right arm, and sit up. I do not keep my hips square with my opponent's hips. When I sit up, I turn to my side. I grab his left arm with my right hand and then pull his arm into me and secure it underneath my arm. My left arm is hooked underneath his right arm and is wrapped tightly around his back. With everything secure, I fall to my right side, elevate my left leg into his right leg, and sweep him over. Because I have control of his left arm, he can't place his left hand on the mat to block the sweep. One more time. I sit up into my opponent, establish an underhook with my left arm, grab his right arm, hip out to my left side, and sweep. It is important to notice the positioning of my right leg. You can hook it around the inside of your opponent's left leg, or you can place your foot on his left knee. You can even place it to the outside of your opponent's left leg. All the positions work. It boils down to what you find works best. I am in the guard, establish an underhook, sit up, dominate his arm, and execute the sweep. One more time. I dominate his arm, and then sweep. When you're in the half guard, it is very important that you establish an underhook and get up to your side. If you're flat on your back, your opponent has total control. So, once I dig my right arm under my opponent's left arm and establish an underhook, I grab his far side to maintain the position. Next, I pull my left leg out from between my opponent's legs. To get the sweep, I hook my left arm around his far leg, pull his leg into me, and drive into him to put him on his back. It is a very simple sweep, but highly effective. As I mentioned, it is very important to establish the underhook. If my opponent is postured up, then I dig my right arm under his left arm and drive into him. If you establish the underhook and don't move into your opponent, he can establish an overhook on your arm and then use his position to punch you in the face. So you want to get very close to your opponent to prevent him from striking you. It destroys his angle to strike. Now I come to all fours, block the knee, and drive. Now fast. To create space, I drive my right arm into my opponent's throat and force him away. With his body pushed away from my body, it is much easier to pummel my right arm underneath his left arm and establish an underhook. Next, I move my body into him to prevent him from having a strong angle to strike me. So I'm in the half guard and I enter like this. In this situation, your opponent has passed your guard and moved into the 100 kilos or side control position. First off, I place my right forearm into my opponent's throat and apply upward pressure. If I wrap my right arm around the back of his head, it makes it easier for my opponent to make offensive movements. So I place my arm across his throat. Once I accomplish this, I create space between our bodies by pushing off my feet, elevating my hips, and pushing him upward using my arms. Keeping him elevated with my arms, I drop my back to the mat. Using the space I just created, I pummel my right arm under his left arm and establish an underhook. At the same time, I escape out to the side and come up to my knees. Establishing a seatbelt around his waist using my right arm, I am now in a position to strike him with my left hand. I have escaped side control. I drive my right arm into my opponent's neck, elevate his body, establish an underhook, and escape out from underneath him. I drive my arm across my opponent's throat, push off, make space, establish an underhook, and move around to take my opponent's back. One more time. He holds me, I get my arm across his throat, elevate him,